everyone, and welcome to another session of AP Human Geography with Mr. Elrod. We're continuing on in Unit 3, discussing culture, and today we're going to get started on some specific elements of culture. Specifically, we're going to talk about, or at least we're going to continue talk. We're going to start talking about language, and then after language, we'll move on to religion. Now, some of the reasons that we are staying on language and religion, and we're going to talk about these specifically, is because language and religion is languages and religion are something that are common to everyone in the world. Everyone has a language that they speak and a religion that they practice. Now, some of you might argue that there are some who are atheist or agnostic or things along those lines, but I would even come back and argue that those are actually religions in and of themselves, and that they cause people to have religious tendencies, or at least what we might consider to be religious tendencies. But not to harp on that too much. But anyway, pretty much everyone around the world and throughout history participates and has a language and a religion, and it's something that we all share. And it's also something that's very important to us. Language, obviously, the way that we communicate, whether it's through verbal expression or it's through written expression, or depending on what culture we're looking at, the written expression is some form of picture. They also show us the things that are important to us, the things that we value, and so religion and language are something that are highly personal, and highly important to people, and can tell us a lot about them. When we look at language, even in our world today, we find that language is constantly evolving and developing and changing. And again, this is both the written language and the spoken language. It's pretty funny to look back and you think about, if we think specifically English, the way that English has changed and evolved, just over the last 10 to 15 years, especially if you think about technological development that has occurred, the new words that are entering into our English vocabulary on a fairly regular basis. When you have things like from CD to DVD to Blu-ray to iPad to iPod, to cell phone, to 3G, 4G, LTE. So any of those things are new words that are entering into our vocabulary. When you look at maybe the way that we express ourselves, some new expressions are moving into to our vocabulary. I especially like to look back at like the 60s, 70s, 80s, and the 50s, and look at the way that people describe things. If you watch any old television shows that were popular from those eras, and you see the expressions that the people were using, and just the way that those words have changed over time, and not only the way that the expressions have changed over time, but the specific words that are used to express similar things, or the way that the word itself and what it means has changed over time. Those are always interesting things to look into. So language is something that's constantly evolving and developing, and here are just a couple of things. I thought this was pretty interesting because back during when I was in high school, cell phones were coming out and becoming more popular, and people were starting to use them, and instant messaging was really popular. So the shorthand was necessary, really, because of the way that the cell phones were developed. And so you just get a couple of examples here. When I was a student in high school, you needed these shorthands on cell phones, and today, this is not really as popular anymore, this text messaging lingo. Because when I was a student, we didn't have full QWERTY keyboards on our cell phones, and so what's interesting is you saw the development of this text messaging lingo move through and become more important because of the cell phone and the way that it was made. But now, once we've started putting QWERTY keyboards or full keyboards on our cell phones, we no longer need this text messaging lingo. So something that we thought would become more and more important, now it's become less and less important because of the way that our technology has changed and adapted. And when we talk about language and we talk about the development of new languages, or the way that languages spread and develop, we talk about what's called language divergence. Language divergence helps us to see where certain forms of the original language came from. So basically what happens is a language is going to change over time as people separate, and also as new experiences for those people with that particular language occur. Sorry, I didn't mean to get ahead of myself. So the example that I like to use for this is if we pretend that, let's say here's a mountain range in the middle of some land. I was watching the Never-Ending Story the other night, so maybe it's Fantasia. We're in Fantasia, and we have people group A. People group A live over here on this side of the mountain, and on this side of the mountain, people group A, let's say that they have, oh, I don't know, let's say that they have yaks over here. So of course, if people group A over here have yaks, and let's see, the yak of course says yak. So he says yak. So of course, if the people group over here have a yak, they're going to have a word for yak and an expression for yak, something that's very common to them. But let's pretend that people group A moves over to this side of the mountain. It's a very high, treacherous mountain. Let's say maybe the population grows to the extent where people from this side of the mountains need to move over here to create more space for their population, whatever happens to be. So then they move to this side of the mountain, set up a permanent residence. And as they move to this side of the mountain, this side over here has no yaks. The only thing that they have on this side of the mountain are cows. What we would consider cows. Of course, the cow says moo. I'm not really sure what a yak says, so he says yak. So this is the cow that says moo. So when the person over here looks and they first see the cow, it looks similar to a yak, but it's not a yak. They realize it's not a yak. They see that it's different. And they look over here and they see themselves, I have no word to express exactly what this particular animal is. So this is how a new word is going to develop, because we have to create a new word to express the new experience that we're having. So whether it's animals, or let's pretend on this side, over here, people group A, they have no snow, so of course they're not going to have a word for snow. So when you move over here to this side of the mountain, let's say they become people group B. Now they have snow, so now a new word for snow is going to develop in their language. And if there are no yaks on this side of the mountain, more than likely people group B will lose the term yak in their vocabulary because they have no use for it anymore. It might stay around for a little while, but eventually it's going to go away, or the term yak might be used to describe something else. So this is how language divergence is going to work. As people move and as they experience new things and have to adopt new words into their vocabulary, the vocabulary itself is going to change as they experience those new things. So some examples, an example of that is what today is the largest language family in our world, spoken by the most people in our world, so the Indo-European language family. Now this is actually just a small geographic area of what the Indo-European language family covers, because it also covers most of North America and South America. But if you look here, you have the Indo-European language family, so that means that all of these languages represented here that are shaded in are somehow related. Now, the belief is that the people who originally spoke this either came from the Caucasus Mountains, or they came from somewhere over here, maybe the Anatolia Peninsula. This is how exact we can get with history. We're not really sure. Someone in this giant area over here, potentially, maybe somewhere. Anyhow, so the belief is that they started kind of in Caucasus Mountains, Anatolia Peninsula, western Russia. I've seen several different explanations either way. But as those people moved and they moved to new territories, they experienced new things. New vocabularies were adopted and adapted, and they began to spread that language, and eventually it becomes Germanic languages as a part of the Indo-European language branch. And so we have this distinct language branch of the Indo-European language family. So it's Germanic languages that are all related to each other. You have this Romance branch, okay, and of course Romance languages, the European languages that are spoken. Even some in South Asia, we're talking about Hindi, and then some other languages that are spoken here in India are all related to the Indo-European people who spoke the predecessor to English and a variety of other languages in our world. Well, that's all that we have time for today. Thank you very much, and next time When we come back, we'll talk about some different terms that are related to languages and moods and kind of culture and what happens when cultures run into each other.